when a desperate trucker stopped to help a stray dog on a foggy highway. He had no idea he was about to uncover a chilling secret, one that would lead him into a battle against cruelty, corruption, and his own haunted past. What began as an act of kindness would soon turn into a fight for justice, proving that sometimes, even the smallest lives can spark the greatest courage. The morning mist blanketed Interstate 95 like a ghostly veil, blurring the edges of the world. The hum of tires on wet asphalt and the faint strains of a country ballad on the radio were the only sounds accompanying Logan Reeves as he navigated his Freightliner down the highway. The dim glow of dawn painted the horizon in muted orange and gray hues. But Logan's mind was elsewhere. 2 decades behind the wheel had given him a sharp eye for the road. And yet, his thoughts often drifted. Today, they wandered to the faded photograph tucked into his sun visor, a memory of Claire, his late wife, smiling brightly in a sunflower field. That photo had been his anchor on countless lonely nights, reminding him of a life that felt like a distant dream. Logan adjusted his rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of his own reflection. Graying stubble, weary eyes, and a face weathered by miles of solitude. Just another morning, just another drive, or so he thought, as he rounded a gentle bend. Something unusual caught his attention on the shoulder. First, it looked like a discarded piece of trash, a crumpled tarp or maybe an old duffel bag, but something about its shape seemed alive. Logan slowed the truck, his instincts sharper than his logic. Pulling onto the shoulder, the Freightliner hissed to a stop. The moment the engine quieted, a faint sound broke through the fog, a soft, desperate whimper. "What the hell?" Logan muttered, grabbing his flashlight from the glove compartment. The metallic flashlight felt cold in his hand, its weight a comforting reminder of Claire. She'd given it to him years ago, her words engraved on the side, "Light always finds light," as he stepped out into the damp morning air. Those words carried a weight he couldn't yet explain. Logan aimed the beam toward the noise. What he saw made his chest tighten. A scruffy, golden-haired dog stood frozen in the flashlight's glow. Her matted fur clung to her trembling frame, and her wide, terrified eyes seemed to plead for mercy. Nestled against her belly were 4 tiny puppies, their frail bodies huddled together for warmth. "Jesus," Logan whispered, his voice catching in his throat. He crouched low, speaking softly. "It's okay, girl. I'm not gonna hurt you." The mother dog didn't move, her body rigid with fear, but her eyes never left his. Her puppies let out faint whimpers, barely audible over the distant hum of passing cars. Logan's flashlight caught a glint of metal around her neck, a frayed leather collar with a strange symbol etched into it, a circle pierced by an arrow. Logan's heart sank. The collar was a sign that she had once belonged to someone who had abandoned her and her puppies to die. Before he could process the thought, the low rumble of an approaching car broke through the silence. Logan turned his head to see a sleek black sedan rolling by. Its tinted windows made it impossible to see the driver, but the vehicle slowed as it passed, lingering for a moment before accelerating into the mist. Logan felt a chill run down his spine. The way the car had paused, waiting set his nerves on edge. Shaking off the unease, Logan turned back to the dog. He pulled off his worn leather jacket, gently draping it over the trembling family. "Come on, girl," he murmured. "Let's get you someplace safe." Took time and patience, but the mother dog finally allowed him to approach. Logan carefully gathered the puppies into his jacket, their tiny bodies barely filling the folds of the fabric. Then, with slow, deliberate movements, he lifted the mother dog into his arms and carried her to the cab of his truck. As he placed her gently onto the passenger seat, she let out a low, exhausted whine, her eyes locked on his. "It's all right now," Logan said softly, brushing his hand over her tangled fur. "You're not alone anymore." As Logan settled back into the driver's seat, the truck's engine rumbled to life, a low, steady sound that seemed to echo the rhythm of his racing thoughts. He glanced at the mother dog curled up tightly around her puppies on the passenger seat, his leather jacket forming a makeshift nest. Her wide, cautious eyes never left him, as if she were silently weighing whether to trust the stranger who had disrupted her quiet despair. The weight of the moment pressed down on him. This wasn't just a stray dog. This was a mother clinging to her last shred of hope, her frail body shielding her babies from a world that had abandoned them. And now, without warning, their fate was in his hands. He exhaled deeply, gripping the wheel as the truck began to roll forward. "All right, Mama," he muttered. "Let's get you some help." The highway stretched endlessly ahead, the fog lifting slowly as the sun climbed higher into the sky. As the miles ticked by, Logan's mind churned with questions. Who would leave a dog like this to die? What did that strange symbol on her collar mean? And why had that black sedan seemed so menacing? For a man who had spent his life chasing the horizon, Logan rarely felt lost. But now, with a family of helpless animals in his care and an unsettling sense that this was no random encounter, he felt adrift in uncharted waters. He reached over to the radio, twisting the knob until the static cleared and a familiar voice filled the cab. "Before I share this incredible story that shocked Hollywood and the military world alike, I want to connect with you, my amazing listeners. Where are you tuning in from today? Drop your city or your country's flag in the comments. And if you've ever felt that unexplainable bond with an animal, hit that like button because sometimes they're the ones who save us." Logan's lips twitched into a faint smile. "Guess it's not just me feeling sentimental today," he said to the dog, whose ears perked slightly at the sound of his voice. A green highway sign loomed ahead, signaling the upcoming exit for a small truck stop he knew well. The Pine Haven rest area wasn't much a gas station, a diner, and a mechanic's garage, but it had always been a safe harbor for weary travelers. And now, it might be the lifeline these dogs needed. Pulling into the lot, Logan parked the truck near the edge of the gravel, away from the busier fueling bays. He stepped out and opened the passenger door carefully, trying not to startle the mother dog. She whimpered softly as he reached for the puppies, cradling them gently in his jacket before coaxing her to follow. The familiar bell above the diner's door jingled as Logan stepped inside, the warm scent of coffee and frying bacon meeting him like an old friend. Behind the counter, a woman with curly auburn hair tied up in a loose bun looked up, her face breaking into a smile. "Logan Reeves," she called, wiping her hands on her apron. "Haven't seen you in a while. What brings you back?" "Hey, Maggie," he replied, nodding toward the bundle in his arms. "Got a bit of an emergency." Her smile faded as she peered closer. "Oh, no. What happened? Are those puppies?" Logan confirmed, his tone grim. "Found them and their mom on the side of the highway. They're in rough shape. Thought maybe you could help." Maggie's heart-shaped face softened as she rounded the counter. "You did the right thing bringing them here. Let's get them warm and see what we can do." A few minutes later, Logan was seated at a corner booth with a steaming cup of coffee while Maggie busied herself gathering supplies. The mother dog lay curled at his feet, her eyes darting nervously around the room but never straying far from her puppies, who were now wrapped snugly in clean towels. The bell jingled again, and a man in grease-streaked overalls stepped in, his heavy boots clunking against the tile floor. "Logan," he greeted with a gruff nod. "What's all this about puppies?" "Hey, Joe," Logan replied. "I was hoping you might know a vet around here who could take a look at them. They're not in great shape, and I think one of them might be sick." Joe crouched down, inspecting the mother dog with a practiced eye. "Poor thing," he muttered. "Yeah, there's a clinic about 10 miles east. Dr. Bennett's good people. I'll give her a call. See if she can squeeze you in." "Thanks, Joe," Logan said, relief washing over him. As Joe headed for the phone, Maggie returned with a bowl of water and a plate of scrambled eggs. She set them down carefully in front of the mother dog, who sniffed hesitantly before taking a tentative bite. Logan watched her eat, his mind still racing. Something about this whole situation didn't sit right. The collar, the car, the sheer desperation in the dog's eyes. It all pointed to a story much bigger than a simple case of abandonment. "Hey, Maggie," he said, breaking the silence. "You ever see anything like this before?" She glanced up from wiping the counter, her expression thoughtful. "Not exactly, but I've heard rumors. A lot of dogs have been showing up lately. Abandoned, sick, some with strange marks on their collars. People are saying there's a breeder out there dumping them when they can't sell." Logan felt a chill creep up his spine. "You think this might be connected?" Maggie hesitated, then nodded. "Could be. There's been talk about a place called Golden Gate Kennels. They closed down a few months ago, but no one knows what happened to the dogs." The name struck a chord. Faint but insistent. Logan couldn't quite place it, but something told him this was just the beginning. The puppies stirred in their makeshift nest, their tiny cries pulling him back to the moment. Whatever the truth was, Logan knew one thing for certain. He couldn't walk away now. Outside, the sun had burned away the last of the fog. But for Logan, the path ahead was only growing darker. The truck rumbled softly as Logan pulled out of Pine Haven Rest Area, heading toward the clinic Joe had mentioned. The morning sun was now high, casting golden light on the highway, but Logan's thoughts remained heavy. The mother dog, whom Maggie had affectionately started calling Daisy, lay curled on the passenger seat, her head resting protectively over the small bundle of puppies. Her exhausted eyes held a mixture of trust and worry, as if she understood the precarious balance between safety and danger they now faced. Logan glanced at her, his mind replaying Maggie's words about the breeder. Golden Gate Kennels. The name felt familiar, tugging at the edges of a memory he couldn't quite grasp. What kind of place would abandon animals like this? And what did that strange symbol on Daisy's collar mean? Was it simply a marker of ownership? Or did it point to something far more sinister? The clinic came into view, a modest brick building with a small sign reading Bennett Veterinary Care. Logan parked the truck and carefully gathered the puppies, wrapped securely in Maggie's towels. Daisy followed hesitantly, her tail tucked low but her eyes locked on Logan, as if he were her last tether to hope. Inside, the reception area was quiet. A young assistant greeted him warmly, her gaze softening when she saw the animals. "Dr. Bennett will see you right away," she said, leading them into a small examination room. Dr. Bennett, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a calming presence, entered moments later. She knelt to examine Daisy first, speaking softly as she ran her hands gently over the dog's frail frame. "She's malnourished, but strong," Bennett murmured, turning her attention to the puppies. Her expression grew serious as she listened to the smallest one's labored breathing. "This little one's in trouble. I'll need to run some tests." Logan nodded, his chest tightening. "Do whatever you need to. Just tell me what's wrong." Dr. Bennett stood, her gaze steady but concerned. "I'll do my best, but this kind of respiratory distress can be tricky. The next 24 hours will be critical." As she disappeared into the back with the sick puppy, Logan sank into a chair in the corner of the room. Daisy settled beside him, her head resting on his knee. He absent-mindedly stroked her fur, his mind churning with unanswered questions. Why would a breeder go to the trouble of marking a collar, only to discard the animal like trash? And who was driving that black sedan on the highway? When Dr. Bennett returned, her face was a mix of relief and worry. "We've stabilized the pup for now," she said. "But this isn't a one-time fix. They'll need ongoing care. And something about this situation doesn't sit right with me." Logan frowned. "What do you mean?" Bennett reached into a drawer, pulling out a folder filled with notes. "You're not the first person to bring in dogs like this. Over the past few months, we've had several cases, same breed, same story, found on highways, malnourished, with collars bearing strange markings." Logan's stomach turned. "And no one knows where they're coming from?" "There've been whispers," Bennett admitted. "Golden Gate Kennels, for one. But the deeper I look, the more it feels like something bigger is going on. Logan leaned back, his mind racing. He thought about Daisy's trembling frame, the mysterious car, the fragmented rumors Maggie had shared. How far did this go? And how many more animals were out there, suffering the same fate? As if sensing his unease, Daisy nudged his hand with her nose. Logan looked down at her, a strange determination hardening in his chest. He didn't know what kind of mess he was stepping into, but one thing was clear. He wasn't about to let Daisy and her pups become another unsolved story. What had he stumbled into on that foggy highway? Who was behind this cruel operation? And most importantly, how far was Logan willing to go to uncover the truth? The questions gnawed at him, but there was no turning back now. This wasn't just about saving Daisy and her puppies anymore. It was about justice for all the lives that had been discarded along the way. Logan left the clinic with a heavy heart and a head full of questions. Daisy and her 3 remaining puppies rested quietly in the truck's cab, their fragile forms wrapped in blankets Maggie had given him. The smallest pup, still at the clinic under Dr. Bennett's watchful eye, haunted his thoughts. Every mile of the road ahead seemed to stretch infinitely, the vast emptiness mirroring the unknown path he was now walking. The symbol on Daisy's collar wouldn't leave his mind. It wasn't just a random design, it felt deliberate, almost like a brand. The name Golden Gate Kennels echoed in his memory, and the pieces were beginning to fall into place. This wasn't just a cruel breeder cutting corners. It felt bigger, more calculated. And if that was true, how many other dogs had suffered the same fate? As the truck rolled back into Pine Haven Rest Area, Logan parked near the diner and stepped out. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the gravel lot as he headed inside. Maggie greeted him with her usual warm smile, though it quickly faded when she saw the look on his face. "Something wrong?" she asked, pouring him a fresh cup of coffee. Logan hesitated, then slid into the booth across from her. "I think these dogs are part of something bigger," he said, his voice low. "Dr. Bennett's seen other cases, same breed, same markings." She mentioned Golden Gate Kennels. Maggie's expression darkened. "That name's been coming up a lot lately. People have been talking about it. But no one seems to know the full story. Some say it was shut down because of illegal practices. Others think they just disappeared to avoid lawsuits." Logan rubbed his temples. "I can't shake the feeling that car I saw, the black sedan, it's connected somehow. Whoever was in it was watching me." Maggie's eyes widened. "You think they were following you?" "Maybe," Logan admitted. "Or maybe I'm just paranoid. Either way, I need to find out what's going on. These dogs deserve better than to be thrown away like garbage." Joe, the mechanic, wandered over, wiping grease from his hands on a rag. "You're talking about Golden Gate?" he asked, pulling up a chair. "I might have heard something you'd want to know." Logan leaned forward. "What is it?" Joe hesitated, glancing around as if someone might overhear. "Couple weeks back, one of my regulars was talking about a breeder going under. Said they were dumping dogs across state lines to cover their tracks. Apparently, they're tied to some shady investors who don't want any heat coming their way." Logan's jaw tightened. "Investors? What kind of people invest in something like this?" "The kind who don't care how many lives they ruin, as long as the money's good," Joe said grimly. "Word is, they were trying to breed a perfect designer dog, something they could sell for big bucks. But when their experiments started going wrong, they decided it was cheaper to cut their losses." Logan felt a surge of anger rise in his chest. He looked down at Daisy, who had followed him inside and now lay protectively at his feet. The idea that she and her puppies were considered expendable made his blood boil. "Where do I start?" he asked, his voice hard. "Who's behind this?" Joe shook his head. "That's the tricky part. No one knows who's really pulling the strings. But if you're serious about digging, you might want to talk to someone at the animal shelter a couple towns over. They've been taking in a lot of abandoned dogs lately. Maybe they've seen something." Maggie nodded in agreement. "It's worth a shot. And Logan, be careful. If these people are willing to dump dogs like this, They might not think twice about silencing anyone who gets too close. Logan glanced out the window, his mind already racing ahead. What would he find at the shelter? Would they have answers? Or just more questions? And if he kept pulling at this thread, where would it lead him? As the sun dipped lower on the horizon, Logan knew one thing for sure: he couldn't stop now. Too much was at stake. Who were the investors backing this operation? What exactly were they trying to create? And how far were they willing to go to protect their secrets? And most importantly, how many more lives were hanging in the balance, waiting for someone to care enough to save them? The drive to the animal shelter 2 towns over was quieter than Logan expected. Daisy had finally relaxed, her head resting on the edge of the passenger seat while her puppies nestled close to her. The faint hum of the truck's engine was the only sound in the cab. But Logan's thoughts were anything but calm. The weight of what Joe had shared lingered heavily in his mind. Designer dogs, failed experiments, and powerful investors. He couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about greed, it was about control. About people with too much power deciding who or what had value. The shelter sat at the edge of a small, sleepy town. A modest brick building with a faded sign that read Safe Haven Animal Rescue. Logan parked the truck in the gravel lot and stepped out, gently lifting the puppies in their bundle of blankets while Daisy trotted close at his side. Her tail was still tucked low, her body tense, but she seemed to sense that Logan wasn't leading her into harm. The receptionist, a young man with dark curls and a kind smile, looked up as Logan entered. "Welcome to Safe Haven. How can we help you?" Logan shifted the bundle of puppies in his arms. "I was told you've been taking in a lot of abandoned dogs recently. I found these guys on the side of the highway. Their mother too." The receptionist's smile faded as he motioned for Logan to follow him. "You're not the first person to say that," he said quietly. "Come with me." He led Logan down a narrow hallway lined with kennels. The soft sounds of barking and whining echoed off the walls, each kennel occupied by dogs of varying breeds and sizes. Logan noticed something almost immediately. Many of the dogs wore collars with markings similar to Daisy's. Some had faint scars or signs of neglect, their eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hope. The receptionist stopped in front of a door marked "Staff Only" and knocked lightly. A woman in her late 40s opened it, her expression tired but warm. "This is Caroline, our director," the receptionist introduced. "She can tell you more." Caroline extended her hand to Logan. "Thanks for bringing them in," she said, her eyes flicking to the puppies. "It's been a rough few months. Let's talk in my office." Once seated, Logan explained everything. Finding Daisy and her pups, the strange symbol on the collar, the black sedan, and what Joe had told him about Golden Gate Kennels. As he spoke, Caroline's expression grew darker. "You're not wrong to think this is part of something bigger," she said. "We've taken in over a dozen dogs in the past 2 months, all with similar stories, abandoned in remote areas, sick or injured, and all wearing those collars." "What do you know about Golden Gate Kennels?" Logan asked. Caroline leaned back in her chair. "They were a high-end breeder that operated under the radar for years. They promised perfect, designer dogs to wealthy clients. But there were always whispers about unethical practices, overbreeding, neglect, even illegal genetic experiments. When the rumors started gaining traction, they shut down overnight. No one's seen or heard from the owners since." Logan frowned. "If they shut down, why are these dogs still showing up?" "That's the million-dollar question," Caroline replied. "We've tried tracing the collars, but they're custom-made with no identifying information. And whoever's behind this seems to be covering their tracks." Logan sat back, his mind racing. The picture was becoming clearer, but the pieces weren't fitting together yet. "Is there anyone else looking into this? Law enforcement? Animal welfare groups?" Caroline hesitated. "There's a detective, a guy named Ross, who's been sniffing around. He thinks this goes beyond just one kennel, but without solid evidence. His hands are tied. The people behind this have money and connections, enough to make problems disappear." Logan's jaw tightened. He glanced at Daisy, who had settled at his feet, her eyes half closed but still alert. She had been discarded like trash. Her life deemed worthless by people who saw her as a failed product. The thought filled him with a quiet fury. "What can I do?" he asked finally. Caroline studied him for a moment, as if weighing how much to tell him. "If you're serious about helping, talk to Detective Ross. He's been piecing together what he can. But he's hit a wall. Maybe with what you've seen, he can start connecting the dots." "Where do I find him?" "He works out of the precinct in Rivorton, about an hour south of here. I'll give you his number." Logan nodded, determination hardening in his chest. He didn't know what he was walking into, but he couldn't walk away now. Not when so many lives depended on someone standing up against the cruelty. As he prepared to leave, Caroline placed a hand on his arm. "Be careful," she said, her voice low. "These people won't hesitate to protect their operation. If they think you're a threat, they'll come after you." Logan met her gaze, his expression steady. Let them try. Who was really behind Golden Gate Kennels? And how far did their influence reach? What dark truths would Detective Ross uncover? And how dangerous would it be to follow the trail? And with every step deeper into this web, was Logan risking not only his safety but also the lives he had sworn to protect? Logan drove south toward Rivorton, the miles passing in tense silence. Daisy sat upright on the passenger seat, her watchful eyes scanning the road as if sensing the shift in her rescuer's determination. The puppies, now tucked securely into a small crate Maggie had lent him, dozed peacefully. The calm inside the truck was deceptive. Outside, a storm of unanswered questions brewed. The closer Logan got to Rivorton, the more the weight of his decision pressed down on him. Detective Ross's precinct was a modest, brick-faced building tucked between a diner and a dry-cleaning shop. Logan parked the truck, giving Daisy a reassuring pat before stepping out. He carried the crate of puppies inside with Daisy following closely, her leash slack in his hand. The lobby was quiet except for the hum of a fan in the corner. A young officer behind the desk raised an eyebrow as Logan approached. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Detective Ross," Logan said. "Tell him it's about the dogs from Golden Gate Kennels." The officer's expression shifted from indifference to curiosity. He picked up the phone, murmured something, and gestured toward a row of chairs. "He'll be out in a minute." Logan Saturday, his thoughts racing. What kind of man was Ross? Would he take this seriously? Or would he dismiss it as another dead end? The stakes were too high for indifference. Too many lives had already been lost or ruined. A tall, lean man with graying hair and sharp features stepped into the lobby, his badge clipped to his belt. His dark eyes swept over Logan, Daisy, and the crate of puppies before he extended a hand. "Detective Ross, you must be Logan." Logan shook his hand, noting the firm grip. "Thanks for seeing me." Ross nodded, his gaze lingering on the puppies. "Come on back. Let's talk." In Ross's office, a cluttered but organized space lined with stacks of files, Logan recounted everything he'd seen and learned. Finding Daisy and her pups on the highway, the strange collar, the abandoned dogs at the shelter, and the whispers about Golden Gate Kennels. Ross listened intently, his fingers steepled under his chin. When Logan finished, Ross leaned back in his chair. "You've walked into a hornet's nest," he said. "Golden Gate is just the tip of the iceberg. They were part of a much larger network, a syndicate that traffics in high-end designer dogs. They manipulate genetics, overbreed, and cut corners wherever they can to maximize profits. When things go wrong, they discard the defective dogs like garbage." Logan's stomach churned. "And no one's shut them down?" Ross's jaw tightened. "We've tried. The problem is, the people behind this are ghosts. They use shell companies, fake identities, and offshore accounts. Every time we get close, they slip away. But if what you're telling me is true, that means they're getting sloppy. That collar could be a key piece of evidence." He opened a drawer and pulled out a tablet. scrolling through images until he found one of a dog wearing a collar similar to Daisy's. "This is from another case," Ross said. "The markings are identical. We think it's a branding system, a way for them to track their stock." Logan's fists clenched at the word stock. Daisy and her pups weren't products, they were lives. "So what now?" he asked. Ross studied him for a moment. "Now, we need to follow the money. If we can tie Golden Gate's finances to the dogs and trace the ownership, we might finally have enough to bring these people down. But it's not going to be easy, and it's definitely not going to be safe." Logan nodded, his resolve unshaken. "Tell me what you need." Ross glanced at the crate of puppies and then at Daisy, who had settled at Logan's feet. "First, we need to keep them safe. If these people find out you've got their dogs, they won't hesitate to come after you. Second, I'll need you to take this collar to a forensic lab in the city. They can analyze it for any unique materials or identifiers." Logan took the collar from Ross, the weight of it feeling heavier than it should. "And third," Ross's expression darkened, "be ready. These people play dirty. If you get too close, they'll do whatever it takes to protect their operation." As Logan left the precinct, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the streets of Rivorton. His mind buzzed with the gravity of what lay ahead. The collar was a breadcrumb on a dangerous trail, but it was the first real lead in a case that had taken too many dead ends. Who were the ghosts pulling the strings behind Golden Gate kennels? What secrets would the forensic lab uncover about the collar? And how far would these people go to keep those secrets buried? As night fell, Logan couldn't help but wonder if he was walking into a battle he wasn't prepared to fight. But as he glanced at Daisy and her pups, now safe and resting, he knew one thing for certain: he had no choice but to see it through. The drive into the city was tense. The collar lay in a small evidence bag on the passenger seat, its strange symbol illuminated faintly by the glow of the dashboard lights. Daisy rested beside it, her eyes half closed but her ears twitching at every sound. The pups were nestled in the crate behind him, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around them. Logan couldn't stop replaying Ross's words in his mind. This wasn't just about one kennel or even one network. It was a web of greed and cruelty, with threads stretching farther than anyone had imagined. The thought that someone might be willing to harm Daisy, her pups, or even him just to protect their operation sent a chill through him. What kind of people saw lives as nothing more than commodities to be disposed of? The forensic lab Ross had directed him to was tucked into an unassuming industrial complex on the outskirts of the city. Logan parked in a dimly lit lot, scanning the area before stepping out. His senses were on high alert, every shadow and sound amplified by the weight of what he was carrying. He secured the crate and Daisy in the truck before heading inside, clutching the evidence bag tightly in his hand. A technician greeted him in the sterile, fluorescent-lit lobby. She was a petite woman with sharp eyes and an air of quiet authority. "Detective Ross called ahead," she said, motioning for Logan to follow her. "I'll take it from here." Logan handed over the collar, watching as she placed it carefully on a workbench. She began her analysis immediately, using various tools to examine the material under a magnifying glass. "This is high-grade leather," she said after a moment. "But the etching is interesting. It's not just decorative. It looks like a branding mark." Logan leaned closer. "Can you trace it? Figure out where it came from?" The technician nodded. "If the leather was treated or dyed using specific chemicals, we can pinpoint the manufacturer. The symbol itself might also be registered somewhere, corporate logos, trademarks, things like that." As she worked, Logan's phone buzzed in his pocket. It was Ross. "Logan, I just got word that one of Golden Gate's former employees might be willing to talk. He reached out anonymously but says he has information that could blow this whole thing wide open." Logan's heart quickened. "Where do I find him?" "He wants to meet tonight at an old diner off Route 17. Says he's scared for his life and won't stay in one place too long. I'm sending you the location now." Logan glanced at the technician, who was still immersed in her work. I'll head there after this. Let me know if anything changes. Ross hesitated. Be careful, Logan. If this guy's telling the truth, there's a good chance someone else is already looking for him. Logan ended the call, his mind racing. The stakes were climbing faster than he could keep up, and every step forward seemed to pull him deeper into the unknown. Who was this informant? And why was he coming forward now? Could Logan trust him? Or was this some kind of trap? The technician interrupted his thoughts. There's something unusual here, she said, holding the collar under a bright light. This symbol isn't just etched. It's embedded with microscopic metal particles. It's like a serial number, but more sophisticated. Logan frowned. Why would they do that? She looked at him, her expression grim. It's a tracking system. Whoever made this collar wanted to ensure they could monitor the animal it belonged to. This isn't just about branding. It's about control. The revelation sent a jolt through Logan. If Daisy's collar was part of a tracking system, then the people behind this operation might already know where she was. His thoughts raced as he thanked the technician and left the lab, his urgency growing with every step. Back in the truck, Logan checked the location Ross had sent him. The diner was an hour away, a secluded spot in the middle of nowhere. He glanced at Daisy, who had perked up slightly, her ears twitching at the sound of his voice. Looks like we've got another stop, girl, he said, starting the engine. The drive to the diner felt like an eternity. The dark highway stretched endlessly ahead, the silence broken only by the soft hum of the truck. Logan couldn't shake the feeling that he was being followed. Every pair of headlights in the rearview mirror sent a fresh wave of paranoia through him. When he finally reached the diner, it was almost midnight. The neon sign buzzed faintly, casting an eerie glow over the empty parking lot. Logan parked near the entrance and scanned the area, his senses on edge. The informant was supposed to be inside, but the quiet stillness of the place made him hesitate. He stepped inside, the bell above the door jingling softly. The diner was nearly empty, save for a lone man seated in a corner booth. He was thin, his face lined with worry, and his hands trembled as he nursed a cup of coffee. Logan approached cautiously, his footsteps echoing on the tile floor. "Are you the guy?" Logan asked, his voice low. The man nodded, his eyes darting around the room. "Yeah, name's Travis. You're the one Ross sent." Logan slid into the booth across from him. "What do you know about Golden Gate?" Travis leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. "Everything. The breeding programs, the experiments, the people funding it all. They're not just making designer dogs, they're trying to create something new, something they can patent and sell like a product." Logan's blood ran cold. "What do you mean? Something new?" Travis hesitated, his eyes darting toward the window. "They're manipulating genetics, trying to breed dogs with specific traits, intelligence, size, temperament. But it's not just for show. They're selling them to corporations, even government contracts. And when the experiments fail, they dump the animals." Logan finished grimly. Travis nodded, his face pale. "I worked there for 2 years, saw things I'll never forget. When the place shut down, they told us to destroy everything. But I kept records. I've got files, emails, documents, proof of everything." Logan leaned closer. "Where are they?" Travis hesitated again, his voice trembling. "In my car. I'll—" The sound of shattering glass cut him off. Both men ducked instinctively as a bullet tore through the window, embedding itself in the wall behind them. Logan grabbed Travis by the arm, pulling him to the floor as chaos erupted around them. Who had found them so quickly? What secrets did Travis's files hold that were worth killing for? And how far was Logan willing to go to protect the truth and the lives hanging in the balance? The sound of shattering glass still echoed in Logan's ears as he and Travis hit the floor. Daisy growled low under the table, her sharp eyes locked on the blown-out window. Another bullet whizzed through the air, splintering the sugar dispenser on the counter and scattering glass and white crystals everywhere. "We've got to get out of here. Now!" Logan barked, grabbing Travis by the arm and pulling him to his feet. "They're going to kill me," Travis stammered, his hands trembling. "I can't." "Shut up and move," Logan snapped, shoving him toward the back of the diner. Daisy stayed close to his side, her body tense, ready for anything. The screech of tires outside made Logan's stomach tighten. A sleek black car skidded to a stop in front of the diner. Two figures in black stepped out, guns glinting under the dim glow of the streetlights. Logan shoved the back door open, pushing Travis and Daisy into the dark alley behind the diner. "My car's parked nearby," Travis panted, pointing toward the edge of the parking lot. "Grab the files and get into my truck," Logan growled, scanning the shadows for movement. Travis stumbled toward his car, fumbling with the door. He yanked a large backpack from the passenger seat just as a sharp crack pierced the air. The tire of his sedan exploded with a hiss, the force making him freeze in place. Logan didn't hesitate. "Run!" Together, they sprinted toward Logan's truck. Daisy leapt into the passenger seat first, followed by Travis, who barely managed to slam the door shut before another shot shattered the back window. Logan jammed the truck into gear, the engine roaring as they peeled out of the lot. "They're following us," Travis shouted, twisting in his seat to look behind them. Headlights loomed in the rearview mirror, closing in fast. "Hold on," Logan barked, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the wheel. He swerved onto a side road, the truck's tires screeching on the pavement. Daisy barked furiously, her sharp, urgent cries cutting through the chaos. In the mirror, Logan saw the black car speeding closer, its windows rolling down. The glint of a gun barrel emerged, aimed squarely at the truck. Logan cursed under his breath and jerked the wheel, veering toward a dirt path that branched off the main road. The truck bucked and jolted over the uneven terrain, sending the black car into a wild swerve. It smashed into a wooden fence, its momentum halted by the impact. Logan didn't slow down. He pushed the truck forward, the roar of the engine drowning out his pounding heartbeat. The path eventually led back to a larger road, and he merged onto it, finally easing off the gas. In the silence that followed, Travis slumped against the seat, gasping for breath. "They're not going to stop," Travis muttered, clutching the backpack like a lifeline. "They know I have the files." Logan glanced at the bag, his jaw tight. "Do you really have what it takes to bring them down?" Travis nodded, his face pale but resolute. "Yes, I have everything: emails, financial records, test data. It's all here. Then we're going to make sure the world sees it," Logan said firmly, though the weight of his words hung heavy in the air. Even as he spoke, Logan couldn't shake the questions swirling in his mind. Who were these people? And how far were they willing to go to keep their secrets buried? Would the files in Travis's backpack be enough to end their operation? And more importantly, could Logan keep Daisy, her pups, and himself safe as the noose tightened around them all? The road ahead felt darker than ever, but turning back was no longer an option. Logan's truck roared down the highway, the black car no longer in sight, but its shadow loomed in his mind. The bag of files sat heavily on Travis's lap, a physical reminder of the magnitude of what they were up against. Daisy rested her head on Logan's knee, her quiet presence grounding him as his thoughts raced. "We can't keep running blind," Logan muttered. "What exactly is in those files, Travis?" Travis unzipped the bag with trembling hands, pulling out a laptop and a bundle of printed documents. "It's all here: financial ledgers, genetic research, internal emails. These people didn't just breed dogs, they manipulated their DNA to create new traits: intelligence, obedience, even specific physical characteristics. They wanted to patent entire bloodlines, turning living beings into commodities." Logan's stomach churned. "And when the experiments failed, they discarded the dogs," Travis said grimly, "dumped them on highways, in shelters, anywhere they wouldn't be traced back. Daisy and her pups? They're survivors of a project called Eden Line. It was supposed to be the crown jewel of their operation, perfectly engineered pets for the ultra-wealthy. But something went wrong. Genetic defects, health issues. They saw them as defective products. Logan clenched the steering wheel, his knuckles white. The idea of Daisy and her pups being treated as disposable commodities ignited a rage deep within him. Who's behind all this? Travis scrolled through the files on his laptop, his face illuminated by the pale blue glow. The name that comes up most is Nathan Grayson. He's a biotech billionaire with ties to genetic research and animal breeding. Golden Gate was just one of his fronts. The man has money, power, and connections. Bringing him down won't be easy. Logan let out a bitter laugh. Nothing about this has been easy. Travis hesitated, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. There's something else. These files mention a secondary facility. It's where they kept the dogs before deciding which ones were marketable. If Daisy and her pups were dumped, it's because they were moved from that facility. The rest of the dogs, they might still be there. Logan's eyes narrowed. Where? Travis pulled up a map. It's remote, hidden in the woods outside a small town called Clearwater. Looks like it's still active. Logan's pulse quickened. If there were other dogs trapped there, they didn't have time to waste. We're going to Clearwater. Travis's eyes widened. Are you crazy? If we go there, we'll be walking straight into their hands. Then we'll make sure we're not alone, Logan said firmly, reaching for his phone. He dialed Ross, and the detective picked up on the second ring. You're still alive. That's a good start, Ross said dryly. Barely, Logan replied. We've got files tying Nathan Grayson to Golden Gate and proof of genetic experiments. But there's more, a facility in Clearwater. Dogs might still be trapped there. Ross was silent for a moment. Clearwater, I've heard whispers about it but never had proof. If it's real, we need to act fast. I can mobilize some contacts in animal welfare and maybe even a few state officers. But Logan, if Grayson's involved, you can bet he has people guarding that place. Then we'll be ready, Logan said. Just tell me when and where to meet. Ross sighed. This isn't a small operation. It's dangerous. Logan, so is leaving those dogs behind. Logan shot back. We're not backing down. The plan was set. They would meet Ross and his contacts near Clearwater the following night, using the cover of darkness to get into the facility. Travis's files would provide leverage if things went sideways. But the mission was clear: expose the operation and rescue as many dogs as they could. As the hours ticked by, Logan couldn't help but feel the weight of what lay ahead. Daisy, sensing his unease, nuzzled his hand, her gentle presence a reminder of why he was doing this. For her pups, and for all the lives that had been cast aside. When they finally reached the rendezvous point, a quiet clearing off a dirt road, Ross was waiting with a small team. Among them were 2 animal welfare officers and a veterinarian who had volunteered to assist with the rescue. The tension in the air was palpable as they reviewed the plan. We'll approach from the east, Ross explained, pointing to a satellite map on his tablet. There's a service entrance here that's less guarded. Travis's files suggest the dogs are kept in kennels in the main building. Once we're inside, we'll split up. One team secures the dogs. The other gathers evidence. Logan nodded, his jaw set. And if Grayson's men show up? We'll be ready, Ross said, his voice steady. But Logan, if it comes down to a choice between the dogs and the files, we take the dogs. Logan met his gaze. No question. As night fell, the team moved into position. The facility loomed in the distance, its chain-link fences and floodlights casting long shadows across the forest. Logan's heart pounded as they crept closer, every sound amplified in the stillness. What would they find inside? Were the dogs still alive? Or had Grayson already moved to cover his tracks? And if they succeeded in exposing this operation, what kind of retaliation would they face? As they reached the fence line, Logan tightened his grip on the wire cutters, his resolve stronger than ever. Whatever waited for them on the other side, he was ready to face it head-on. The morning sun crept over the horizon as Logan stood at the edge of the clearing, watching the aftermath of their daring raid. The rescued dogs, now safely loaded into waiting animal welfare vans, began their journey to a better life. Daisy stayed close to Logan's side, her calm presence a stark contrast to the chaos they'd escaped just hours ago. She nudged his hand, and he gave her an affectionate scratch behind the ears. Ross approached, his face weary but triumphant. "We got what we needed. The files, the client lists, the evidence. It's enough to bury Grayson and his operation. The authorities are already moving in on his known assets." Logan nodded, his jaw tight. "And the dogs? They'll be okay." Ross smiled faintly. "Thanks to you. Yeah. The shelter network is ready to take them in. We've got vets on standby, too. They'll get the care they need." Travis emerged from one of the vans, his backpack empty but his shoulders lighter. "It's over, isn't it?" he asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. Logan looked at him, then at Daisy and the pups resting in the truck's cab. "For them, it's a new beginning." The sound of approaching sirens broke the quiet. Police cars rolled into the clearing, their lights flashing in the dawn haze. One of the officers stepped out and approached Ross, handing him a radio. "Grayson's been apprehended," she reported. "We found him at a private airstrip trying to flee the country." Relief washed over the group like a wave. Ross clapped Logan on the shoulder. "You did it, Reeves. You stood up when no one else would. You saved lives." Logan's gaze softened as he looked back at Daisy. "She saved mine first." A week later, Logan sat on the porch of his small house, watching the pups play in the yard. Their energy was infectious, their once fragile bodies now strong and lively. Daisy lay at his feet, her golden coat gleaming in the sunlight. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with trust and gratitude. Ross had stopped by earlier with good news. Grayson's empire was dismantled, his clients exposed, and new legislation was already in motion to tighten regulations on breeding practices. Justice had been served, and the world was a little safer for animals like Daisy and her pups. As Logan leaned back in his chair, he thought about everything that had brought him to this moment. The foggy highway, the desperate whimpers, the impossible choices. It had all led here, to a life fuller than he'd ever imagined. His home, once silent and empty, now overflowed with life and love. Daisy barked softly, drawing his attention to the pups chasing each other in the yard. Logan chuckled. "You've got your hands full with them, girl." The sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, a fitting end to a long, harrowing journey. Logan let out a deep breath, feeling, for the first time in years, peace. What a journey this has been. From a foggy highway to a fight for justice. This story reminds us that even the smallest acts of kindness can ripple into something far greater. If you've been inspired by Logan's courage and Daisy's resilience, we invite you to join us in creating more stories that touch hearts and ignite change. What part of this story moved you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. And remember, every like, share, and subscribe helps us continue crafting stories that matter. Let's keep weaving this tapestry together. See you in the next adventure. Hit that subscribe button and become part of the Tapestry of Worlds community, where every tale we weave brings a little more light into the world. Don't forget to like this video and share it with anyone who believes in the power of hope, love, and second chances. Together, we can build a world where no life is ever discarded.